We further find the allegation that the defendant, Monica Cementelli, intentionally killed the victim by means of lying in wait. Dated April 11th, 2025. Juror seat number 10, four-person.
Not only did I not do this, I know who did. I know Scott killed his father, took my husband, the father of Chris, Emily, and Amanda.
Made a decision, and she says it later. If I have to go to jail for the rest of my life, it was worth it.
Beyond naive smiles and tender gestures, these ordinary women hid pure evil beneath the surface. Female killers who walked among us, blending into everyday life while harboring dark and harmful intentions. From Monica Cementelli, a wife who staged her husband's death, to Crystal Whipple, a thief who killed over a $35 manicure. These women concealed monstrous secrets behind seemingly innocent faces.
She just kept saying that he's gone, that I'm not a wife anymore. Just the weeping, the not being able to breathe. She was beyond devastated, beyond devastated.
In 2017, a calm afternoon in Woodland Hills turned into a nightmare. Fabio Cementelli, a well-known celebrity hairstylist and a loving father, was found stabbed to death in his backyard. The news stunned the beauty industry and everyone who knew him. He was kind, talented, and deeply loved by his family. But behind the peaceful image of his home, something heartbreaking was unfolding. At first, it looked like a home invasion gone wrong. Police believed it was a random act of conflict. However, the truth was far more personal and painful. As detectives searched for answers, they began to uncover secrets that would leave everyone speechless. Investigators eventually turned their focus to someone else, Fabio's wife, Monica. They learned she was having an affair with Robert Baker, a man with a dark past. Slowly, the pieces came together. Monica and Baker had been using encrypted apps to keep their conversations hidden. Evidence showed Monica may have left doors unlocked to let the killers in. A man involved in the killing, Chris Austin, admitted to helping Baker in the attack. He later testified that Monica was part of the plan all along. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a crime, it was a betrayal. The courtroom was filled with quiet tears. Fabio's sisters, Morella and Lori, called it a day of healing. Justice was served today, Morella said. Our spirits are lifted. My brother can finally rest. We are overjoyed she will spend the rest of her life in jail, Lori added. Prosecutors said Monica wanted to inherit Fabio's estate and hoped to build a new life with Baker. Instead, she destroyed everything: her family, her future, and the life of a man who trusted her. Baker pleaded no contest and was sentenced to life in prison. Monica went to trial. She cried as the verdict was read.
The indictment. We further find the murder to be of the first degree and carried out by the defendant, Monica Cementelli, for financial gain within the meaning of Penal Code Section 190.2A1 to be true. We further find the allegation that the defendant, Monica Cementelli,
guilty on all counts, including conspiracy and killing for financial gain. She now faces life in prison with no chance of parole. It was a painful journey for everyone. A beloved father lost, a family forever changed, and a wife who should have protected, but instead chose to destroy. Our next case involves a woman who conspired with her friend to murder her husband, then carried on as if nothing ever happened.
What the verdict says, I am innocent of these crimes. I never asked anyone to harm or murder my husband.
On a quiet February night in 2019, a hero returned home after a long shift. Evansville firefighter Robert Dewar had served his community for nearly 3 decades. But just as he pulled into his driveway, he was ambushed, shot multiple times, and left to die. What began as the tragic loss of a local hero soon unraveled into something darker. His wife, Elizabeth Fox Dewar, was behind it. Elizabeth had been married to Robert for years. To the outside world, they seemed like a normal couple. But behind closed doors, she was hiding a deadly secret. She had started a relationship with a man named Larry Richmond Sr., a convicted killer recently released from prison. And together, they plotted the unthinkable: Robert's death. After Robert was gunned down, the Evansville Police Department launched an intensive investigation. Though the weapon, a powerful Taurus Judge revolver, was never recovered, detectives pieced together a trail of digital footprints, witness statements, and motive. Suspicion quickly turned to Elizabeth and her new lover, Richmond. It became clear that Elizabeth didn't just have a broken marriage, she had a plan. The trial was intense. Prosecutors revealed that Elizabeth didn't just know about the killing, she helped plan it. She wanted Robert out of the picture and used Richmond to make it happen. Robert, who wore his badge with pride, had no idea the woman he trusted most was setting him up to be killed. Some say her motive for killing was money. Others say she wanted to start a new life with her lover. But no matter the reason, the cost was the same. One good man dead and a community devastated. In May 2024, after years of pain and waiting, justice was served. As the verdict was read and Elizabeth was found guilty of murder and conspiracy to commit killing, she started sobbing and said, "I'm in shock, devastated and lost." A judge sentenced her to 90 years in prison, 60 years for murder and 30 years for conspiracy. Since the charges were treated as separate acts, she will serve the sentences one after the other. The courtroom was packed when the sentence was read. Some whispered yes in relief. Robert's fellow firefighters, friends, and family had waited 5 years for this day. His daughter, Lindsay, tearfully remembered the moment she learned her father was gone. His best friend spoke about losing a partner and a brother. The pain was still raw, but the sentence brought some closure. Elizabeth showed little emotion, even as the sentence was read. She plans to appeal, but for Robert's loved ones, the message was clear. Justice may take time, but it never forgets. Our next case reveals a chilling mother who placed the blame for her ghastly crimes entirely on her son.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Just watch your back.
It began with smoke rising from a quiet property in Cherokee County, Georgia. The fire wasn't from a bonfire or a grill. It came from something far more chilling. In 2018, a chilling discovery was made on the quiet property of Gary Wayne Ferris, a respected lawyer and devoted father. His remains were found beneath a burned pile of debris. Gary had lived there with his wife, Melody, but soon after the grim find, Melody was arrested. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a trail of troubling signs, lies, inconsistencies in Melody's story, and a history of tension within the family. At first, the scene was a mystery. No one could believe it. A well-known family, shattered without warning. Detectives approached the case with precision, examining every detail. As the investigation unfolded, suspicion gradually turned toward Melody. They interviewed the couple's 3 children, Emily, Chris, and Scott. They searched the property, inspected the burn pile, and analyzed Melody's statements against the physical evidence. She was arrested and charged not only with Gary's killing, but also with attempting to cover it up. Despite the charges, Melody maintained her innocence. At sentencing, Melody finally broke her silence. She told the courtroom she had stayed quiet for over 6 years, following legal advice and trying to protect her family. But now, she said she couldn't hold it in any longer. Looking directly at her son, she admitted she could no longer protect him. She recalled seeing him near the fire that day. At first, he claimed he was just making sure it didn't spread, but later his story changed. Still, none of these claims changed the outcome. Nothing Melody said in court was enough to prove someone else was responsible. So what tore this family apart was a combination of long-standing issues in the marriage. Prosecutors highlighted a past affair and more recent arguments over money. It was a slow unraveling that ultimately ended in tragedy. And while the court reached a verdict, what truly happened in those final moments remains unclear. In court, she claimed her son, Scott, was behind it all. She described him as angry and unpredictable, and said he even failed a lie detector test. She said he framed her, but the court saw things differently. Tears came into Melody's eyes when the verdict was read, and she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. She also received 2 additional 5-year sentences, one for hiding Gary's death, the other for making false statements.
We, the jury, as to count 4, find the defendant guilty.
The sentences would run concurrently, but the judge made it clear parole was unlikely. A once intact family was left in pieces. Her husband was gone. A mother stood accused by her children. 3 siblings were left with wounds that time alone can't heal. And the long, painful silence of a family that may never find peace. Our next case is even colder. A woman driven by revenge, leaving behind a trail of her own family's lives.
She came into my life telling me that she was there. She wasn't there to pull my family apart. She was there to give me the opportunity to clean up my life.
In the quiet stillness of a small Vermont town, no one could have predicted the storm that was about to erupt. Not in the sky, but in the mind of one woman. Beneath the surface of Jody Herring's seemingly ordinary life, rage and despair had been building, slowly boiling over. Then, in a single day, that inner chaos spilled outward in the form of a merciless killing spree that would leave 4 people dead and an entire community reeling. Jody Herring, a mother who had recently lost custody of her 9-year-old daughter, had reached her breaking point. On August 7, 2015, just hours before a string of brutal killings, she left a voicemail that would later become a haunting piece of evidence. "You might want to stop calling DCF or I'm going to come there and shoot your brains out," she screamed into the answering machine of her relatives. Those words, once dismissed as a desperate outburst, turned into a terrifying prophecy. Herring's rage first turned inward, toward her blood. On the morning of August 7th, she went to the home of her relatives in Berlin, Vermont. Inside the house were Rhonda Herring, her cousin's mother, Regina Herring, her aunt, Julie Falzarano, her grandmother. What unfolded was a silent massacre. The 3 women were shot dead. There was no cry for help, no time to run. Police believe Herring executed the killings with methodical precision, cold, calculated, and personal. The bodies wouldn't be discovered until the next day, when Tiffany Herring Flint, daughter of one of the victims, came looking for her mother. Social worker Lara Sobel was gunned down. Later that same day, Herring took her fury to the state itself. Around 4:45 p.m., as Lara Sobel, a social worker with DCF, walked out of her office in downtown Barrie, Herring was waiting. Armed with a hunting rifle, she shot Sobel twice in the torso in front of horrified witnesses. Sobel collapsed near the building steps, and bystanders quickly restrained Herring until police arrived. Witness Carlin Sizemore testified that Herring was shouting, waving the rifle wildly, and yelling, "They didn't listen to me. It was my 9-year-old daughter. They got what they deserved." Jody Herring believed that the people closest to her had betrayed her. She was convinced that her relatives had been speaking to the Vermont Department for Children and Families, influencing the agency's decision to take away her daughter. For Herring, this wasn't just about custody. It was personal. It was war. In her eyes, those who helped DCF had destroyed her family, and now she would destroy theirs. During the sentencing hearing, defense attorney David Slay painted a dark picture of Herring's past. Growing up in a household of 16 children, Herring and her relatives were allegedly victims of ongoing physical, emotional, and psychological mistreatment. The trauma left deep psychological scars. Slay revealed that Herring's mental health had been rapidly deteriorating. She had recently been released early from a 90-day involuntary commitment at a psychiatric facility. If the system hadn't failed her again, he argued, she would have still been hospitalized the day the deaths occurred.
Count 1, which is the murder of Julie Falzarano, sentence will be 20 years to life to serve.
In July, Jody Herring pleaded guilty to first-degree murder for the death of Lara Sobel and 3 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of her relatives.
I've been a mean person in my whole life, and Mr. Sobel is right. The loss of a child is so hard to endure. Felicia's right here. Desiree's up in the Chittenden County Correctional Center with me.
As the verdict was read, Jody broke down in court. The plea agreement recommends a sentence of 20 years to life for the second-degree murder charges. The decision of whether she will spend the rest of her life behind bars without the possibility of parole for Sobel's murder now rests with Superior Court Judge John Pacht. As the hearing continues, Vermont is left reeling from the horrific events. A child lost, 4 lives taken, and a justice system once again forced to reckon with the devastating cost of untreated trauma and unaddressed mental illness. Our next case is pure horror, where a $35 manicure led to a life being taken without a second thought.
I don't know the laws, and I don't care what it'll take. I will get you a lawyer. We will fix this. Just come home, call me, call Grandma. We could do this. We could do this together.
It was an ordinary day in Las Vegas when something unthinkable happened outside a small nail salon. What began as a routine manicure ended in a tragedy that will leave a family shattered and a city in shock. This is the case of Crystal Whipple and the tragic death of a hardworking mother, Annie Knock Nguyen. Annie Nguyen was a loving mother, a dedicated worker, and a woman who gave everything to support her daughters. She managed Crystal Nails and Spa and often worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. On the day of the incident in December 2018, she was just doing her job, offering someone a $35 manicure. That customer was 23-year-old Crystal Whipple. After finishing her appointment, Whipple tried to pay using a credit card, but it was declined. She told Annie she would get cash from her car, but when she stepped outside, she jumped into a black Camaro and tried to flee. Annie and her boyfriend followed her out, hoping to stop her. As Whipple tried to escape, she hit Annie with the stolen car and dragged her about 50 feet across the parking lot. Annie was badly injured and died from her wounds. The police immediately began searching for Whipple, but she had already disappeared. Whipple used a fake ID and fled across state lines, from Las Vegas to Boulder City, then to Los Angeles, and finally to Arizona. She was on the run. She even planned to travel to North Carolina, but in January 2019, she was finally caught and arrested. At first, Whipple faced charges including robbery, stolen vehicle use, and burglary. But later, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In court, she chose not to say anything during sentencing, but her silence couldn't undo the pain she'd caused. Her motive was simple: to avoid paying for a $35 manicure. That choice, to steal a service and run, led to a deadly outcome. A decision made in seconds took away a mother, a provider, and a beloved member of her community. District Judge Tiara Jones sentenced Whipple to 10 to 25 years in prison. As the judge announced these words, she simply gave a grief-stricken expression. The judge called the case absolutely horrifying. A woman lost her life simply trying to do her job. During the hearing, Annie's youngest daughter, Leigh, shared heartfelt words through a video feed. She said her mom was the epitome of selflessness. A refugee who raised her children alone, Annie always put her family first. Leigh added, "My achievements are her achievements. We all miss her very much." Annie's life was one of hard work and sacrifice. In the end, her dedication to her job led to a tragic and unfair end. This case reminds us that behind every face is a story, a family, and a future. And sometimes, the smallest acts of dishonesty can lead to the biggest disasters. The actions of these women shattered the illusion that danger always looks obvious. Their reactions in court were more than just emotional. They were powerful reminders that even the most unexpected faces can hide deep secrets. In the end, their life sentences weren't just about punishment. They served as a wake-up call that appearances can be deceiving, and justice always finds its way.
Do not remember this.
On the videos, on several of them.
Yeah.
In my movies, sadly, everybody died.
Me and my mother are Hurricane Katrina survivors.
Okay.
And my birth certificate was washed away in Katrina.
In the hotel room, it showed her laying on the ground on the rug.
The world has seen its fair share of ruthless criminals, but some crimes are so brutal and bizarre that they defy logic. These aren't just killers, they're the craziest killers. From Alton Coleman's chilling crime to Sean Finnegan's brutal attack, these killers crossed a line that changed their lives forever. Let's begin.
We, the jury, recommend that the sentence of death be imposed on the defendant, Alton Coleman.
On May 29, 1984, a mother named Juanita Wheat placed her trust in a man she thought was a friend. This man was Alton Coleman. He had befriended Juanita and spent time with her daughter, Vernita Wheat. But in an instant, that trust was broken. Coleman abducted Vernita and took her to Waukegan, Illinois. Days passed and Juanita's worst fears were confirmed. On June 19th, Vernita's lifeless body was discovered in an abandoned building. She had been assaulted and strangled. This was just the beginning of a terrifying crime spree that spread across 6 states. leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Coleman was not alone in his rampage. His partner, Deborah Brown, stood by his side as they targeted innocent victims, young and old. Just 2 days after Vernita's murder, Coleman tricked a man named Robert Carpenter into letting him stay at his home. The next morning, Coleman stole Carpenter's car and disappeared. By June, Coleman and Brown had already attacked 2 more children, Annie Turks and her niece, Tamika Turks. While Annie miraculously survived, Tamika was not as fortunate. Her body was later found in a field, marking yet another tragedy. But Coleman and Brown did not stop there. They abducted and murdered 25-year-old Donna Williams, leaving her body to decompose miles away from her home. With each attack, the brutality escalated. In Ohio, the couple strangled a child named Rochelle Temple and her mother Virginia before stuffing their bodies in a crawl space. They also broke into homes, tied up residents, and stole from them. By the time authorities realized the magnitude of their crimes, the duo had become some of the most wanted criminals in America. As the killings continued, the FBI placed Alton Coleman on their 10 most wanted list. On July 13, 1984, Coleman and Brown's violence reached its peak when they brutally attacked Harry Walters and his wife Marlene. They arrived at their home, pretending to be interested in purchasing a camper that the couple had put up for sale. This was likely a ruse to gain entry into their home without raising suspicion. Once inside, Coleman and Brown carried out a violent assault. Harry Walters was badly injured and left unconscious, but managed to survive. Sadly, Marlene Walters did not. She lost her life in the attack.
Mrs. Walters was murdered, her husband beaten unconscious. The couple was found by their daughter.
Realizing they were being hunted, Coleman and Brown kept moving, switching vehicles, disguising themselves, and even kidnapping a college professor. However, their luck finally ran out on July 20th, 1984, when a man in Evanston, Illinois, recognized Coleman and called the police. Officers quickly surrounded a park where the two were sitting. Brown tried to walk away as they approached, but she was caught and searched. Inside her purse was a loaded gun. Coleman was also searched, and a steak knife was found hidden in his socks. The nightmare was finally over. Justice moved swiftly. Ohio was given the first chance to prosecute them, and both were sentenced to death.
The application of such courage must be continued until you are dead.
For the attack on Tawny Story and the murder of Marlene Walters, along with several other murders. Coleman, who had also received death sentences in Indiana and Illinois, appealed multiple times but failed to overturn his fate. On April 26, 2002, Alton Coleman was executed by lethal injection. His final act was reciting Psalm 23 before taking his last breath. Meanwhile, Brown's death sentence was eventually commuted to life in prison without parole due to her low IQ and what some called a master-slave relationship with Coleman. She remains behind bars, serving her sentence. Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown's crimes devastated families and spread fear. While Coleman faced execution, the pain he caused remains. Victims' families are left with memories and unanswered questions. Our next case reveals that sometimes the most chilling horrors are captured on camera by the killer himself.
What do you make of the man capable of doing that? What do you say about him?
That sounds like someone who's on drugs or something.
On February 26, 2024, Brian Stephen Smith sat in court, known as a memory card murderer, showing no emotion as his trial for the brutal murders of 2 Alaska Native women began. The crimes he committed were beyond horrific, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. Smith, originally from South Africa, had become a U.S. citizen shortly before his crimes. He targeted vulnerable women who were experiencing homelessness in Anchorage, Alaska. His actions were so cruel that even the judge described them as the stuff of nightmares. The case took a shocking turn in 2019 when a woman who had stolen Smith's phone made a horrifying discovery. On his phone was a video showing the torture and murder of 30-year-old Kathleen Henry. The woman quickly turned the footage over to the police, which led to an intense investigation. As detectives examined the video, they heard Smith's voice, his distinctive South African accent, narrating the brutal scene as if he were directing a horror film. "In my movies, everybody always dies," he said. He was seen beating and strangling Henry while telling her to die. Yet, that was only the first chapter. Smith later admitted to killing 52-year-old Veronica Abucha, who had been missing for 4 months. He said he picked her up while his wife was away, brought her home, and tragically took her life after an argument. He then left her remains north of Anchorage, where authorities later found evidence of the crime. During the trial, the jury was shown the gruesome videos, but the gallery was spared from witnessing the horror. Though Smith's face wasn't visible in the recordings, his chilling voice was enough to identify him. It took the jury less than 2 hours to find him guilty after a 3-week trial. Judge Kevin Saxby didn't hold back during sentencing. He made sure that Kathleen Henry and Veronica Abuchuk were not just remembered as victims, but as real people who deserved justice. Smith received a staggering 226-year sentence, 99 years for each murder, plus additional time for other charges, including assault and tampering with evidence. Since Alaska does not have the death penalty, this was the maximum punishment he could receive.
I agree that he should remain in custody for the remainder of his life with no possibility of ever being released.
Throughout the trial and sentencing, Smith remained emotionless, never showing any remorse for his actions. But justice had been served, and he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Brian Stephen Smith's case is a stark reminder of real-world evil. Though the victims' families can't get their loved ones back, they can find some solace in knowing he will never walk free again. In our next case, the evidence wasn't as clear-cut, leaving lingering questions about whether justice was truly served.
You said you confessed to your mother.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you confess for something that you didn't do?
I keep telling you. How many times do I have to tell you?
On a chilling night in March 2008, Memphis was shaken to its core by a horrific crime scene on Leicester Street. 6 people were brutally murdered inside a home. It was a crime so gruesome that it became known as the worst mass murder in the city's history. When police arrived, they found the victims in disturbing conditions. Some shot, others stabbed, and all brutally beaten. Miraculously, 3 young children survived, though they were severely injured. The entire city wanted justice, and pressure mounted on law enforcement to find the killer. Within days, police arrested 33-year-old Jesse Dotson, the brother of one of the victims, Cecil Dotson. Authorities claimed that Jesse, in a drunken rage, had murdered his brother after an argument and then killed 5 others to eliminate witnesses. The case was so high profile that it was even featured on the crime documentary series The First 48. During questioning, Jesse admitted to the murders but later took back his statement, saying he was forced to confess to a crime he didn't commit. Despite this, the prosecution pushed ahead. The trial moved quickly, and in 2010, Dotson was found guilty and sentenced to death for 6 counts of first-degree murder. Years later, Jesse Dotson is fighting for his life again, not in a courtroom as a defendant, but as an inmate on death row, pleading for his conviction to be overturned. He filed a 249-page petition claiming his constitutional rights were violated during the interrogation. His legal team argues that his confession was false, having been extracted under extreme psychological pressure. The petition states that police used aggressive tactics and threats, and even withheld crucial evidence that could have pointed to another suspect. According to Dotson's legal team, the murders may have been the result of gang retaliation, not a family dispute. They claim that Cecil Dotson, Jesse's brother, was deeply involved in gang activity and may have angered dangerous individuals. The FBI even suggested that the crime scene bore signs of a cartel-style execution, but this information was never presented in court. Adding to the doubt, forensic evidence did not place Jesse at the crime scene. No DNA, no blood, and no physical proof linked him to the murders. Even more troubling, hair samples found on 2 of the victims have yet to be tested, meaning crucial evidence could have been overlooked. Jesse Dotson's defense team is now pushing for his conviction to be overturned, arguing that the case against him was built on a weak foundation. They believe he was an easy target, a man with a troubled past, forced into a confession under duress. Despite his appeals, the Tennessee Supreme Court has denied Dotson's request for post-conviction relief and sentenced him to death. However, he doesn't show any remorse for his act, but his fight is far from over. With new evidence and unanswered questions, many wonder, did Memphis convict the wrong man? And if so, is the real killer still out there? One thing is certain, the Leicester Street murders remain one of the most disturbing cases in Memphis history, and the truth may still be waiting to be uncovered. Now we turn to a case where the victim and perpetrator collide in a shocking tale of manipulation and murder.
On one side of a scale where I really wasn't getting much coverage. I wasn't being able to actually be able to voice my opinion. I wasn't able to let everyone know.
For years, Dee Dee Blanchard was seen as a devoted mother, sacrificing everything to care for her terminally ill daughter, Gypsy Rose. Bound to a wheelchair, fed through a tube, and battling a long list of severe medical conditions, Gypsy was the picture of a child in need. However, on June 10, 2015, everything changed. Dee Dee was found stabbed to death in her home, and the helpless daughter everyone pitied she was missing. Has someone kidnapped Gypsy Rose? Or was this innocent girl not so innocent after all? For years, Gypsy Rose lived under the control of her mother, Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard. From the outside, Dee Dee appeared to be a devoted mother caring for a terminally ill daughter, but the truth was far more sinister. Dee Dee had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychological disorder where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in a dependent to gain attention and sympathy. Gypsy was never sick. She was a victim of her mother's lies and mistreatment. She was isolated from the world, denied an education, and physically punished whenever she questioned her reality. As she grew older, she began to realize the truth. Her mother was not her savior, but her captor. Desperate for escape, Gypsy turned to the internet. In 2012, she met Nicholas Godejohn on a Christian dating site. He was socially awkward, obsessed with dark fantasies, and believed he had an evil side. As their relationship deepened, Gypsy saw him as her only way out. She convinced Nicholas to help her kill her mother. On June 10, 2015, Gypsy hid in the bathroom of their home in Missouri while Nicholas carried out the brutal attack. He stabbed Dee Dee multiple times in her sleep. Afterward, they fled to Wisconsin, where they were later arrested. The gruesome crime shocked the nation. Investigators uncovered years of medical fraud, deception, and harm that Dee Dee had orchestrated. The truth about Gypsy's false illnesses came to light, and public sympathy shifted towards her. Many believed she had been driven to commit the crime. Gypsy accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. But Nicholas, who had carried out the murder, faced a much harsher fate. Despite his defense arguing that he was manipulated due to his autism.
Both of them happened, like I've said it before in my statements, is very much the truth, so I'll just say it again.
He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole, but he chose to remain silent and expressionless throughout the verdict. Gypsy served 7 years before being granted parole. Now free, she has expressed deep remorse, stating, "I'm not proud of what I did. I regret it every single day." She has since married and is trying to rebuild her life. Nicholas, however, remains in prison, still believing that Gypsy was his soulmate and that they were meant to be together. Our next case is about pure evil, where a woman was murdered by a man who showed no mercy.
First-degree felony murder during the perpetration or attempt of to perpetrate for aggravated rape.
In August 2024, Sean Finnegan was sentenced to death for the 2019 kidnapping, assault, and murder of Jennifer Paxton in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. On a cold December night in 2019, Jennifer Paxton went missing. Her family and friends searched desperately, hoping she would return. But what they didn't know was that she had fallen into the hands of a monster, a man who showed no mercy, a man named Sean Finnegan. Jennifer, a 35-year-old woman from Tennessee, had been kidnapped and taken to Finnegan's apartment in Oak Ridge. What happened behind those closed doors was something out of a nightmare. Sean Finnegan, a 56-year-old man, was not alone in his crimes. His girlfriend, Rebecca Dishman, played a part in the horror that followed. Jennifer was held captive, tortured, and assaulted in ways too horrific to imagine. For weeks, Finnegan mistreated her, showing no remorse. Then he decided it was time to end her life. But he didn't do it quickly. He strangled her slowly with a string, pausing in between to take smoke breaks. When Jennifer finally took her last breath, Finnegan and Dishman wrapped her body in garbage bags and placed her in a freezer inside their bedroom. Months passed, and Jennifer's loved ones still had no idea where she was. But in August 2020, police arrived at Finnegan's home for a search. That's when they made the horrifying discovery. Jennifer's body had been removed from the freezer and shoved under his bed. The evidence was clear. Both Finnegan and Dishman were arrested. When the case moved to the courtroom, prosecutors described the crime, explaining how Finnegan had held Jennifer against her will and caused her immense suffering before taking her life.
Also slicing injury on the lower back, and that would be in the midline. And we'll see one of the photographs right here.
Dishman, realizing there was no escape, decided to testify against Finnegan. In exchange, she was given a life sentence, avoiding the death penalty. However, Finnegan had no such luck. His crime was too brutal, his actions too evil. The jury knew what he deserved. In 2024, after a long trial, justice was served. The jury sentenced Sean Finnegan to death. However, he remained stone-faced and doesn't show any remorse.
Be guilty of murder in the first degree is charged in the indictment. Upon further verdict of fixing the punishment of death.
The judge made it clear there was no room for mercy. He would pay for what he did. But despite the sentence, legal experts believe he may never actually be executed. With Tennessee's lengthy appeals process and the state pausing lethal injections since 2022, Finnegan might die of natural causes before his sentence is ever carried out. Jennifer's family, though heartbroken, found some closure. They would never get her back, but the man responsible would never walk free again. Despite their pain, they stayed strong, fought for justice, and won. Knowing Finnegan can never harm anyone else brings them some peace. Up next, Catherine Knight, a woman whose brutal crime shocked the nation. Known for her terrifying actions, Knight's case revealed a chilling level of violence and cruelty that few could comprehend.
The 1st of March 2000 is etched on the minds of the people of Aberdeen, Australia, forever.
Never before, and really never again, has there been a crime of this nature actually perpetrated by a woman.
A murder so inexplicably heinous, it still affects all of the officers called to the scene to this day.
Nothing could prepare you for what you were about to see.
Aberdeen, New South Wales, a quiet town where crime was rare. But on the 1st of March 2000, a crime so unimaginable unfolded that it would send shockwaves across Australia. When John Price didn't show up for work, his concerned co-workers called the police. Officers arrived at his home, knocking repeatedly. No answer. But what they saw through the window was enough to force entry. Inside, they walked straight into a horror scene straight out of a nightmare. John Price had been in a harmful relationship with Catherine Knight for years. A butcher by trade, a violent woman by nature, Catherine had a deep fascination with knives, violence, and control. Her past relationships were marked with threats, physical harm, and disturbing behavior. In one case, she had held a previous partner at knife point, demanding he take her back. In another, she slit the throat of his puppy as a warning. When Price finally tried to escape her grasp, filing a restraining order after one of her outbursts, he told friends that if he ever went missing, Knight was to blame. Sadly, he was right. On the night of February 29, 2000, Knight arrived at Price's home under the guise of reconciliation. What happened next was pure horror. She waited until he fell asleep, then launched her sadistic attack. Using a butcher knife, Knight stabbed Price 37 times. Deep, savage blows piercing vital organs. The sheer force of the attack sent blood spattering across the walls. But her twisted desires weren't satisfied. With chilling precision, she skinned his entire body, hung the flesh from a meat hook in the living room, and cooked parts of his body. She set 2 plates on the table, each labeled with the names of Price's children, suggesting she planned to feed them their father. It was so gruesome that hardened investigators needed therapy after witnessing the scene. Knight was found in a drugged state, having taken a handful of pills, likely attempting to stage a fake suicide. She was arrested immediately. During questioning, she claimed she remembered nothing, but the evidence was undeniable. Her trial was one of Australia's most infamous, with zero possibility of parole. The judge, horrified by the details, declared she was too dangerous to ever be freed. She became the first woman in Australian history sentenced to life without parole. In court, Knight showed no emotion, no tears, no remorse, just a chilling blank stare as the crime was laid out in harrowing detail. The family of John Price sat in shock and horror, forced to relive the unimaginable pain of his final moments. While justice was swift, the trauma Knight left behind would never fade. Even behind bars, Knight remains a terrifying enigma. A woman so devoid of empathy that even hardened criminals fear her. She will die in prison, and the world is better off for it. Our next case takes us to the ruthless world of organized crime, where one woman rose to power through murder and cold-blooded executions. But what made her even more terrifying? She didn't even spare her own allies.
She was the largest cocaine importer at the time.
Known in cities across the US as the Godmother for her mafia-like brutality. Gangland warfare has been raging across the city for 3 years.
Miami saw dramatic changes in the homicide rate. We went from probably 80 to 100 murders a year to almost 300 to 400.
In the heart of 1970s Miami, where money flowed like water and violence ruled the streets, one name sent chills through even the most hardened criminals: Griselda Blanco. She wasn't just a lord, she was the queen of retribution, eliminating anyone who stood in her way with ruthless efficiency. But her reign of terror didn't stop at business rivals. Even those closest to her weren't safe. By the time her empire crumbled, Blanca was linked to over 200 murders, including her own husband's, earning her the chilling nickname, the Black Widow. Blanca's criminal roots ran deep. She began her life of crime as a child in Colombia, running scams and kidnappings before diving headfirst into the trade. When she arrived in the US, she quickly dominated Miami's substance market, pioneering new smuggling methods and raking in millions per month. But with power came paranoia. Blanca trusted no one. She ran her operation with an iron fist, ordering brutal executions without hesitation. Drive-by shootings, assassinations in broad daylight. Miami's streets became a war zone under her rule, and law enforcement had had enough. The FBI launched Operation Banshee, an all-out effort to bring Blanca down. In 1985, their patience paid off. Agents arrested Blanca in California, charging her with 3 counts of first-degree murder. But even behind bars, her influence lingered. Authorities feared she was still orchestrating hits from her prison cell. And then came the most shocking twist. While she was serving time, prosecutors discovered evidence linking her to a dozen more killings, including a contract to murder a child over an unpaid drug debt. Despite the mountain of evidence, Blanca struck a plea deal, escaping the death penalty and serving only 7 years before being deported to Colombia. But karma wasn't done with her yet. In 2012, as she left a butcher shop in Medellin, a motorcycle assassin gunned her down, the same execution style she had used on so many of her own enemies. Griselda Blanco's legacy remains one of blood and fear. She wasn't just another cartel boss. She redefined the drug trade, proving that a woman could be just as lethal as any man in the underworld. And yet, in the end, she fell victim to the same world she created. Her story serves as a terrifying reminder that in the world of crime, loyalty is fleeting, and power always comes at a price. Our next case takes us into the twisted world of a woman who played a deadly game of deception. Her charm was a weapon, and her victims never saw the danger until it was too late. This is the story of Sheila Davalloo.
Answer, please. Yes, hello. I think the guy is attacked my neighbor. You think someone attacked your neighbor? Yes. I heard yelling.
In 2002, a quiet Connecticut neighborhood became the setting for a twisted love triangle that would end in obsession, betrayal, and murder. Sheila Davalloo seemed like an ordinary, intelligent woman, until her deadly fixation on another man led to 2 violent attacks that no one saw coming. Sheila was married, but she had a dangerous obsession with her coworker, Nelson Sessler. The problem? He was already in a relationship with Ana Lisa Raimondo, and Sheila couldn't stand being second choice. For months, she carefully manipulated the situation, trying to sabotage Nelson's relationship. She called Ana Lisa's home, pretended to be other women, and planted rumors at work. But none of it was enough. Nelson remained committed to Ana Lisa. That's when Sheila decided to eliminate her competition.
It was a crime triggered by a lover's obsession, and it drove the police down a rabbit hole of dead ends and one big, strange twist.
On November 8, 2002, Ana Lisa was found brutally murdered in her Stamford condo. She had been stabbed multiple times and beaten, her home ransacked to make it look like a robbery. There were no immediate suspects, and the case quickly went cold. Sheila, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened, continuing her affair with Nelson, while still keeping her husband in the dark. But Sheila's thirst for control didn't stop at Ana Lisa. A year later, in 2003, she turned on her own husband. Sheila convinced Paul Christos to play a blindfolded game, then suddenly stabbed him twice in the chest. He barely survived, escaping and calling 911. While paramedics rushed to save him, Sheila made a shocking move. She called Nelson, not 911, as her husband bled out. That mistake exposed everything. Sheila was arrested for the attack on Paul and sentenced to 25 years, but as investigators dug deeper, they linked her to Ana Lisa's murder. DNA evidence, phone records, and her history of jealousy sealed her fate. In 2012, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison.
I'm claiming my innocence.
Not if Sheila Davalloo had her way.
But this is a case where I am being accused of killing somebody.
Sheila never showed remorse for her crimes. Even in court, she appeared cold and detached, refusing to take responsibility. Her story remains one of the most chilling cases of obsession turning deadly, where love jealousy, and deception ended in bloodshed. And the scariest part, if her husband hadn't survived, she might have gotten away with it all. Our next case takes us to a seemingly caring nurse who was trusted with the lives of innocent children. But behind closed doors, she became a silent killer. When authorities uncovered what she had done, it left the entire medical community in shock.
Beverly Allett, a nurse whose mission to kill the youngest and most helpless patients in her care left a nation horrified.
With all eyes anxious for a glimpse of Britain's worst female serial killer,
the former nurse Beverly Allett begins a sentence without end tonight for murdering 4 children in her care and for injuring 9 others. She was given life 13 times over and was told there was no real chance of her ever being free again.
In the early 1900s, Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in England became the center of a terrifying mystery. Babies and young children, previously stable, began suffering sudden, unexplained medical emergencies. Some recovered, but others tragically didn't make it. Doctors were baffled, parents were heartbroken, and no one suspected the friendly pediatric nurse who was always at their bedside, Beverly Allett. Allett presented herself as a dedicated, caring nurse. She consoled grieving parents, reassured doctors, and seemed to be deeply invested in the well-being of her patients. But behind this facade, she was systematically targeting innocent children, injecting them with lethal doses of insulin and potassium, or suffocating them. Between February and April 1991, she attacked 13 children, killing 4 and leaving others permanently disabled. Yet, no one realized what was happening until the pattern emerged. As investigators pieced together the cases, they noticed an unsettling trend. Beverly Allett was present for every single emergency. The hospital launched an internal investigation, uncovering missing medical records and evidence of tampering. Suspicion quickly turned towards Allett, and when forensic testing confirmed that several victims had been deliberately poisoned, she was arrested.
Last night, 23-year-old Beverly Gale Allett of Grantham, a former nurse at the Grantham and Kesteven Hospital, was charged with 4 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 8 counts of causing grievous bodily harm.
In the course of all of the interviews, she maintained her innocence.
Her trial revealed the full horror of her crimes. She had preyed on the most vulnerable, all while pretending to be their protector. The court heard chilling details of her calculated attacks and how she thrived on the chaos and attention they brought. In 1993, Beverly Allett was sentenced to 13 life terms for her crimes, making her one of the worst child killers in British history. She was diagnosed with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where caregivers harm others to gain sympathy and attention. Instead of prison, she was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital, a psychiatric facility where she remains to this day. Families were left devastated. Parents who had trusted her now had to live with the unbearable truth that the person meant to save their children was the one who took them away. Allett has never shown true remorse. Even now, as she serves her sentence, there are fears she could one day be released, sparking outrage from the victims' families. She was supposed to heal the sick. Instead, she became one of the most notorious medical killers of all time. Our next case takes us to a woman whose ruthless ambition led her to orchestrate a cold-blooded execution. She didn't act alone. She pulled the strings from behind the scenes, manipulating others to do her dirty work. But when the truth unraveled, her fate was sealed.
And if Christy can hear me, if you can get away someplace, Christy, phone either home or the Niagara Police as soon as possible.
Is wanted for a series of assaults, 2 last May and 1 just last week. And police say his attacks always follow the same pattern.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Canada was gripped by fear as young women were vanishing, only to be found murdered. At the center of it all was Paul Bernardo, a man later exposed as the Scarborough rapist. But he wasn't working alone. His partner in crime? A woman who shocked the world with her cold-hearted participation, Karla Homolka. Karla wasn't just an unwilling accomplice. She was an active participant in the horrific assaults and murders of multiple victims, including her own younger sister, Tammy Homolka. What made this case even more disturbing was how she played the role of the perfect girlfriend and later, the devoted wife. Behind closed doors, she helped lure victims, cover up crimes, and manipulate those around her. By the time the authorities started connecting Bernardo to the violent crimes, Karla crafted an escape plan. She painted herself as a battered woman, claiming she had been a victim of Paul's mistreatment and had no choice but to comply. In 1993, Karla struck a plea deal, known as the Deal with the Devil, where she agreed to testify against Bernardo in exchange for a 12-year sentence for manslaughter. At the time, prosecutors believed her story, but everything changed when new videotapes surfaced. These tapes proved that Carla wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant. They showed her laughing and enjoying the harm inflicted on their victims, but it was too late. Her plea deal couldn't be overturned. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but Carla walked free in 2005 after serving her full 12-year sentence. She changed her name, moved, and even started a family, attempting to erase her past. But the public never forgot what she had done. Her attempts to blend into normal life only led to public outrage whenever her whereabouts were discovered. Karla Homolka's early release remains one of Canada's most controversial legal decisions. Victims' families, along with the public, felt betrayed by the justice system. How could someone so involved in such horrifying crimes be allowed to walk free? Even today, she lives under a cloud of suspicion, with many believing she never truly paid for her crimes. Her case serves as a terrifying reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people don't look like killers, but they are. Up next, Shay Groves, a woman whose obsession with true crime took a dark and deadly turn.
Serial killer-obsessed woman who stabbed her on-off boyfriend to death has been jailed for life with at least 23 years in prison. Shay Groves sentenced at Winchester Crown Court for the murder of 25-year-old Frankie Fitzgerald.
In the dimly lit bedroom of a serial killer-obsessed woman, a twisted fantasy became a horrifying reality. Shay Groves, a 27-year-old woman from Hampshire, surrounded herself with crime books, weapons, and chilling portraits of infamous murderers. To outsiders, her obsession was nothing more than a dark fascination. But in the summer of 2022, the obsession turned deadly when she brutally murdered her boyfriend, Frankie Fitzgerald. Frankie Fitzgerald thought he was in a passionate romance, but in reality, he was in a dangerous, toxic relationship with a woman living in a fantasy world. Shay, fueled by jealousy, manipulation, and a twisted sense of control, turned their home into a crime scene.
In the early hours of the 17th of July 2022, as Frankie Fitzgerald was asleep in her bed, she used a dagger to slit his throat and then she stabbed him 17 times.
On the night of the murder, an argument spiraled into a bloodbath. Shay, convinced Frankie was cheating on her, flew into a jealous rage. But this wasn't just a fit of passion. This was premeditated. With a dagger inspired by her favorite true crime stories, she stabbed Frankie 17 times, leaving him bleeding out on their bed. And as he took his last breaths, she lit a cigarette and calmly watched. The horror didn't end there. Instead of calling for help, Shay covered up her crime. She messaged her friend, boasting about the murder as if it was a scene from a horror movie. She even tried to stage the crime scene, making it seem like Frankie had attacked her first. But the truth was undeniable. Blood soaked the bed. The murder weapon was still in her home, and her own messages betrayed her twisted mindset. When police arrived, they found a woman disturbingly calm, as if she had just fulfilled some macabre fantasy. During the trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a woman who blurred the lines between fiction and reality. Shay had idolized real-life killers, studied their methods, and ultimately became one herself. She attempted to play the victim, claiming self-defense, but the evidence was stacked against her. The jury saw through her lies, and she was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 23 years behind bars. As the verdict was read, Shay's cold demeanor finally cracked. The woman who once bragged about her crime now sat in shock. There was no way out, no manipulation left to play. For Frankie's family, the sentencing was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but nothing could bring him back. They had lost a son, a brother, a friend, to a woman who had turned her obsession into reality. Shay Groves reveled in her dark fantasies, but our next killer took a different approach, controlling others to do her dirty work.
It is a crime that sent shockwaves through this city. A 14-year-old girl stabbed to death in front of her own home by two teens embroiled in a sick plot.
In the winter of 2008, Toronto, Canada was blanketed in snow as families celebrated the New Year. But for one family, the night would end in horror. At just 14 years old, Stephanie Rengel had her entire life ahead of her. A bright, kind teenager with dreams of becoming a police officer. But as she stepped outside her home that night, she had no idea she was being lured into a deadly trap. Her killer wasn't a stranger, and the person who orchestrated it all, she never even lifted a finger. Melissa Todorovich was only 15 years old, but she was already dangerous. Not in the way most people imagine killers. There were no weapons, no physical violence. Instead, she used something far more insidious: manipulation. She had an obsessive need for control, especially over her boyfriend, David Bagshaw. But there was one thing standing in her way: Stephanie Rangel.
15-year-old Melissa Todorovic badgered her 17-year-old boyfriend David Bagshaw for months with an evil ultimatum: no sex until the girl she viewed as a rival was dead.
Melissa hated Stephanie, not because they were rivals, but because Stephanie had briefly spoken to David years earlier. That was enough. In Melissa's mind, Stephanie had to be erased. For months, Melissa poisoned David's thoughts, demanding he prove his love by killing Stephanie. If he hesitated, she called him weak. She threatened to leave him. She told him he was worthless. At first, David resisted. He knew murder was wrong, but Melissa never let up. She texted him, messaged him, pressured him relentlessly, until finally, he broke. New Year's Day, 2008. Stephanie Rangel received a message. David was outside. He wanted to talk. It was cold, but Stephanie didn't hesitate. She had known David. He wasn't a stranger. She stepped outside. David led her away from the house, down a quiet street. Then suddenly, he attacked. He stabbed her 6 times, then fled. But Stephanie didn't die right away. Even after the brutal attack, she tried to crawl back home. She never made it. As she lay dying in the snow, David sent one final message. He told Melissa it was done. Her response? She smiled. Melissa thought she was untouchable. She hadn't held the knife, so how could she be guilty?
Killing Stephanie might have been more your idea than his idea. Am I accurate? Yeah. Okay.
But investigators uncovered a chilling digital trail. Her messages to David left no doubt. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a premeditated killing orchestrated by a teenage girl. During her trial, prosecutors exposed Melissa for what she was: a master manipulator who turned a petty grudge into a murder. The jury saw through her lies, and in 2009, Melissa Todorovic was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 7 years.
Todorovic was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced as an adult to life in prison with no chance of parole for 7 years. Bagshaw pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and is serving an adult life sentence with no chance of parole for 10 years.
Stephanie's mother sobbed as she described the unimaginable pain of losing her daughter in such a senseless act of violence. And Melissa, she barely reacted. Even in prison, her reputation remained chilling. She wasn't just a killer, she was a manipulator. A teenager who played puppet master and got someone else to do the dirty work. And an innocent girl paid the price. Melissa Todorovic used manipulation to orchestrate a murder. Our next case focuses on a cold and calculating woman who didn't just take part in a crime. She orchestrated an assassination.
61-year-old Donna Scrivo appearing tired and worn. The former nurse, the final witness, accused in the St. Clair Shores murder and dismemberment of her son Ramsey. Scrivo claimed a masked man killed her son and threatened her and her family with death if she told a soul.
In January 2014, a series of black garbage bags were discovered scattered along a Michigan highway. Inside, body parts. Authorities quickly identified the victim as 32-year-old Ramsey Scrivo, a man whose life had ended in unimaginable brutality. But the most horrifying part, the person responsible was his own mother. Donna Scrivo, a former nurse, had always been seen as a devoted mother. But behind closed doors, things were far from normal. Ramsey had been struggling with mental health issues, and Donna had even petitioned to become his legal guardian. But what seemed like a mother trying to help her son took a dark and twisted turn. On January 27, 2014, Donna reported Ramsey missing. But just days later, his dismembered remains were found stuffed in garbage bags, dumped carelessly along the roadside. Police immediately suspected foul play, and all evidence pointed back to Donna.
Yes, we're going to be releasing a picture of a person of interest that we hope citizens can hopefully help us identify, as well as a vehicle, which we'd also like to see if we can tie up.
Investigators searched Donna's home, uncovering a gruesome crime scene. They found bloodstains, a chainsaw, and cleaning supplies, all clear indications of a brutal killing and cover-up. The medical examiner confirmed that Ramsey had been drugged and strangled before his body was dismembered. Donna had then placed his remains in bags, driven around, and discarded them like trash. Security footage showed Donna purchasing a handsaw and cleaning materials just 1 day before Ramsey was killed, proof that this was premeditated. She was arrested on the spot. Donna Scrivo denied everything, claiming a masked intruder had killed her son and forced her to dispose of the body, but the evidence was overwhelming.
Prosecutors say she drugged and strangled her own child, cutting him up with a power saw and dumping his remains. The evidence not in her favor. Security video shows her buying the saw used to kill her son.
After a short trial, she was found guilty of first-degree murder, dismemberment, and tampering with evidence. The judge handed her a life sentence without parole, ensuring she would never walk free again. In court, Donna remained emotionless, even as the jury convicted her of murdering her own child. Ramsey's friends and family were left shattered, unable to comprehend why a mother would commit such a horrific act. Some believe Donna's controlling nature and unstable mindset pushed her to eliminate the very person she claimed to care for. One thing was certain: her cold, calculated crime made her one of the most disturbing female killers in recent history. Our next case is Catherine Magbanua, a Florida woman who was the key player in a deadly murder-for-hire plot. Her reaction to her life sentence will leave you speechless.
A new twist in the alleged murder-for-hire plot. Police in Florida arresting a single mom, accusing her of arranging the killing of a prominent Florida State law professor.
On July 18, 2014, Daniel Markel, a prominent FSU law professor, was pulling into his driveway in Tallahassee, Florida, when a gunman ambushed him in broad daylight. 2 shots were fired at point-blank range, execution style. Markel never stood a chance. But this wasn't a random killing. It was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by someone shockingly close to the family. At the center of it all, Catherine Magbanua. Catherine had once dated Charlie Adelson, Daniel Markel's former brother-in-law. After Charlie's sister Wendy divorced Markel, the family allegedly wanted him out of the picture, permanently. That's when Charlie turned to Catherine, who had dangerous connections. She introduced him to 2 hitmen, Sigfrido Garcia and Luis Rivera, and together they set their deadly plan in motion. For a $100,000 payday, Daniel Markel was as good as dead.
The driver's side window is all bashed in, and he's got blood all over his head.
The investigation spanned years, but when the pieces finally came together, the truth was chilling. Surveillance footage showed a Toyota Prius stalking Markel's home. Phone records linked Catherine to both the killers and Charlie Adelson. A secretly recorded conversation where Charlie and Catherine discussed coded details of the hit, laughing as if a man's life hadn't just been taken. The evidence was irrefutable. In 2022, Catherine Magbanua was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. She had set the plan in motion. She had collected the payment. She was just as responsible as the ones who pulled the trigger.
On count 3, the solicitation to commit murder, you have been found guilty by a jury of that count. You are adjudicated guilty, and you will be sentenced to a consecutive sentence of 30 years in the Department of Corrections.
Catherine was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 2 additional 30-year sentences. The court made it clear there would be no second chances. In court, Catherine Magbanua sat motionless as the judge delivered her life sentence. For years, she denied any involvement, claiming she was just a middlewoman and that she had no idea what Charlie Adelson was planning. But the evidence told a different story. When the words life in prison echoed through the courtroom, Catherine closed her eyes, exhaled sharply, and shook her head. For the first time, the reality of her fate had sunk in. No more excuses, no more appeals for leniency, no way out.
Destroyed as well. The lives of Dan's 2 sons, my grandchildren, were forever turned upside down as a result of this crime.
Meanwhile, Daniel Markel's family, who had waited 8 long years for justice, embraced in relief. Their fight was finally over, but the loss of their son, brother, and father would never be erased. Catherine had played her part in a cold-blooded execution, and now she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, paying the price for a murder that should never have happened. Next, we turn to the case of Tia Young, whose devastating decisions shook those around her, raising questions about trust, betrayal, and the consequences of unchecked anger.
She began to add things that didn't make sense. When we spoke with Tim, it was the same thing. The story was not the same about when they saw each other. Now he had done things that he hadn't mentioned before.
On November 6, 2017, George Young was shot and killed outside his home in Beaufort, Georgia. His wife, Tia Young, had just lost her husband of 22 years, the father of their 3 children, in what seemed like a random act of violence. Tia appeared heartbroken, and her tearful plea for justice was broadcast to the public. She even set up a GoFundMe account to help with funeral expenses. Months after George Young's tragic death, the truth began to unravel unexpectedly. At first, Tia Young's grief seemed genuine as she mourned her husband's loss. However, as the investigation continued, the story took a shocking turn. Police soon arrested Tia and her lover, Harvey Lee, for George's murder. It was revealed that Tia and Harvey had been having an affair, and together they had planned to kill George to claim his $1 million life insurance policy.
He's eliciting hearsay statements.
The defense not holding back on the state's first witness, Young's former boss and friend, Rob Strickland.
He was my go-to guy.
As detectives dug deeper, they found numerous inconsistencies in the stories that Tia and Harvey had been telling. Tia's initial heartbreak and emotional plea for help started to fade, and her behavior became increasingly suspicious. New evidence began to surface, including messages and phone records showing the affair. It became clear that their actions were not those of grieving loved ones, but rather two people involved in a calculated scheme for financial gain. The investigation revealed a web of lies, with Tia and Harvey's actions betraying the trust of a family who believed in their love and loyalty. Their plot, once hidden, was exposed, leaving the community in disbelief over the betrayal and heartbreak that led to George's death. As the trial began, the evidence against Tia and Harvey started to pile up. The jury learned that after George was shot, Tia waited between 5 to 10 minutes before police had come. That alone raised suspicions, as it seemed unusual for a wife to delay reaching out for help after her husband was shot. Investigators also found that the murder weapon was never recovered, and both Tia and Harvey's stories didn't line up. Their accounts had many contradictions, which made it harder for the court to believe their version of events. Further investigation uncovered text messages and photos revealing the affair between Tia and Harvey, exposing the secret they had tried to keep hidden. One of their neighbors even witnessed Harvey tampering with evidence, making it clear that they were trying to cover up their actions. The jury was shocked by how deep the betrayal went.
And I felt like maybe that had something to do with it, but I wasn't sure.
Detectives were stunned.
Tia and Harvey weren't just the grieving spouse and supportive lover they had pretended to be. They were the ones responsible for George's death. The truth was undeniable now. The people who should have loved and protected George were the very ones who plotted his murder for financial gain. Tia and Harvey were both convicted of murder. Tia was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole plus 3 years, while Harvey received a sentence without the chance of parole. But Tia has no remorse for her act. The case was a heartbreaking reminder of the lengths some will go for money and how betrayal can come from those closest to us.
She will spend in prison. A jury found Tia Young guilty of felony murder, aggravated assault. Her alleged lover, Harvey Timothy Lee, was convicted of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault.
The story of George Young's murder left everyone in shock. The woman who cried on camera, pleading for help, was revealed to be behind the death of her husband. The betrayal, lies, and manipulation showed how a family can be torn apart by greed and deceit. It was a tragic and emotional case that raised many questions about trust, love, and the dark side of human nature. These cases reveal the darkest sides of humanity. Lives lost, families shattered, and justice served. While nothing can undo the pain, remembering these stories keeps us vigilant. Evil exists, but so does the fight for justice. But there's more to uncover. Our next video on screen takes you deeper into horrifying cases and the sentences that left the world stunned.